Welcome to another episode of the Journey Podcast. The Journey Podcast is all about sharing the journeys of purpose driven individuals from all walks of life who are following their passion and fulfilling their purpose in their own unique way. And I'm your host, Risa Kawamoto. So it's been a while since I last released my podcast. I think, when was it? I think I like to say it was about April or May last year when I released my last podcast episode. But today's episode is going to be a solo episode, and I'll be sharing my yoga journey to mark the 10-year anniversary of being a yoga teacher. I can't believe it's been 10 years since I first did my yoga teacher training. It's been challenging, it's been rewarding, and it's evolved a lot since my first year of teaching yoga. I evolved so much as a yoga teacher and as a yoga student, and how I live my life, my values, my core principles. Lot has evolved since. And I don't think I ever shared my full yoga journey in the past. And not just my yoga journey, but my thoughts and my experience in the yoga industry and as a yoga teacher. And I have been wanting to do this as a podcast episode for a long time since I launched my podcast, really, because although I love writing blog posts, newsletters, but I feel like sharing my yoga journey is much easier by me just talking to you on podcast. So my hope is that hopefully you get to know me a little bit better from this episode. And hopefully, if you've been wanting to start yoga, you feel inspired to do so. And if you're already practicing yoga, hopefully, my story will inspire you to continue with your journey and learn something from my journey and my experience. And also, if you are thinking of becoming a yoga teacher, if you're thinking to train as a yoga teacher, I also hope that my story will inspire you to embark on that journey to becoming a yoga teacher. And hopefully, you learn something from it as well. So, before I start, I wanted to share what actually yoga is. So, firstly, I would like to acknowledge that yoga originated from ancient India and have been practiced over 5,000 years. I want to share this ancient wisdom to my students and my podcast listeners in the best way I can. And I honor all my teachers that I've been learning from over the past 10 years. And so in the West, yoga has been promoted mainly as a physical exercise. However, yoga is much more than just a physical exercise. Yoga is a way of life. It's a union with the true self. It's your self expression. So, my wish for everyone is to live yoga rather than do yoga as a physical practice. So, I really hope that my podcast episode, especially this one, and my blog posts, my social media posts, my website, encourage everyone to live yoga because that's the message I want to give to everyone, and that's the message I like to share. And that yoga is not just a physical exercise. So let's start from the beginning. My first ever yoga class was through the organization I was working at the time. I think I was around 21. It was my first ever office job, working as an office junior, basically admin assistant. Before that, I was working as a waitress in a restaurant. I worked in the restaurant for 3 years whilst I was studying at the college. And to be honest, I can't actually remember much about the yoga class, but I remember I was feeling very achy after the class. But I didn't stop there. I started going weekly for the next few months at least. But then somehow I stopped going, I remember. I think I went for a few months and then somehow I stopped going to classes. And since then, I was practicing yoga kind of on and off. I tried different style of yoga. So I tried Bikram yoga. I also tried different yoga classes in a gym until I started practicing yoga regularly in my local studio. And I started learning more about yoga philosophy in my spare time as well. And that was when I was 29 years old. So, really, like 8 years later, I started practicing regularly. So, in this local yoga studio, I used to go to classes probably 3 times a week, sometimes 4 times a week. I tried different style of yoga. I tried vinyasa, I tried jivamukti yoga, I tried restorative yoga, yin yoga, Thai yoga, anything that was on the schedule, I tried. It was so much fun just trying different style of yoga. And during that time, I started researching more about yoga on the internet, in particular around yoga history and yoga philosophy. And somehow I can't remember what prompted me, but I started searching for yoga teacher training to deepen my practice and learning the study of yoga. And that was when I was in a job that I didn't really enjoy. But that job I was in, it wasn't a busy role at all. So I had more time to go to yoga classes, 3, 4 times a week and learning about yoga in my spare time. So in a way, it worked out really well for me. And I discovered Ayurveda around that time. So when I was searching for yoga teacher training and different yoga courses, I discovered Ayurveda. And so in my spare time, I would start practicing Ayurvedic morning routine, for example, and also I would do like 3-day Ayurvedic cleansing. And I really kind of immersed into learning more about Ayurveda around that time. But what I was searching for was yoga teacher training. So I was searching, and I remember I Googled 200-hour yoga teacher training, London weekend, because I was working full time at the time and I only had weekends. Lot of yoga teacher training that was available was intensive training abroad, for example, or even like daytime training in London. So I was specifically like really looking for yoga teacher training in London, but during the weekend. And I think there were only a couple of schools did offer weekends. And so I quickly just chose one of them, basically. And that happened to be Ashtanga Vinyasa based training. And if you're not familiar with Ashtanga yoga, Ashtanga is focused on physical yoga poses, and they have a set of yoga poses that you practice all the time. So if you go to Ashtanga yoga classes, you always have a set of sequence that won't change. It would always be the same. And it can be quite physically demanding. And so during that training, they focused on physical yoga poses, and they spent very little time on yoga history and philosophy. There were over 30 people in the training. I much prefer a small group when it comes to training and workshops. So 30 people were way too many people for me. And of those 30 people in that training, there were only one male. And of those 30 people, there were only four of us, including myself, who were from Black, Asian, and minority ethnic background. The majority of the group were white, young, able-bodied females. And I felt like I didn't belong, and I felt like I not cut out to be a successful yoga teacher because I don't look like the majority of the people who are in that group. And also, I have to be honest, I wasn't that flexible or had a great deal of body strength at the time, which is required for intense Ashtanga practice. I also have scoliosis, which is a curvature of spine, which I developed as a child. And I found some yoga poses very challenging for my body. And I still have some yoga poses that are very challenging for my body. But the training, the teachers who are doing this training, they offered no variations to any of the yoga poses, and no support from teachers at all. And yoga teachers who were doing that training favored those who can do advanced yoga poses like handstand, and would get their favorite trainees to substitute their classes in the popular yoga studios in London. And I feel like I experienced firsthand how yoga industry works in the Western countries during the teacher training. And I didn't really have a positive experience during my first teacher training, as you probably guessed. But there is a couple of positive things that came out from my training. The first positive thing was that I quit smoking permanently. I have been a heavy smoker since I was 13, and I attempted many times to quit smoking in the past, but I could do it for a while. I think the longest I did was for like a year, but I always somehow go back to smoking again. But after the teacher training, I actually quit smoking permanently and haven't touched cigarettes since. And another positive thing was that I discovered I really enjoy teaching yoga. I practice teaching yoga to my colleagues at work, thanks to my colleagues for being my guinea pigs. And that really helped me get through the training as well and complete my final assessment, which was teaching full Ashtanga primary series. I really enjoyed teaching my colleagues, although it was early days and I don't think I was teaching well. I was still learning, but it really helped me build that confidence to do my final assessment. And they wanted to practice yoga. So it kind of worked out well for all of us. And so after completing my 200-hour yoga teacher training, I decided to not to approach London yoga studios to teach, but instead I hired a space in a kind of independent gym and started running a private group yoga classes. I focused on teaching beginners because I felt I was still a beginner. I still couldn't do like all those advanced yoga poses. And also, I wanted to help beginners feel welcomed and supported at the beginning of their yoga journey. So, all my kind of private group yoga classes were focused on beginners. I also approached HR in the organization I work if I could run a weekly yoga classes for employees, so basically my colleagues. And that worked out really well because I didn't need to pay for the space and I get to practice my teaching skills and gain more experience. And in terms of my own practice, a few months after completing my yoga teacher training, I moved to a different area in London and I found a lovely local yoga studio there, which I was really happy about. They focused on dynamic yoga, which is not Ashtanga but still physically demanding practice. They called it dynamic hatha yoga. But I really enjoyed it and I started going to classes there 2-3 times a week, usually after work and once a week, like even after teaching my own yoga class at work, I would run back to my local yoga studio. Well, not running, I got on the tube. But yeah, so it was kind of double yoga class for me once a week. And I was super regular student for a good few years, but then I somehow went back to study and learning more about Ayurveda. So somehow I took a break from Ayurveda for, I don't know, maybe 2-3 years after completing my yoga teacher training. I was focusing more on yoga as a physical practice because I wanted to do all those advanced yoga poses like handstand, like all those photos and reels you see on Instagram. But somehow I was called to study Ayurveda somehow, all of a sudden. And I was learning more about circadian rhythm and Ayurvedic doshas, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And I discovered, and I'm not sure if I even knew about this like earlier on, but Ayurveda was teaching that our yoga practice should be adjusted according to our dosha or doshic imbalances and also seasons and the stages of life we are in. And I realized I was practicing dynamic yoga, which is physically demanding practice in the evening, where we should ideally be winding down for bedtime. So I stopped going to classes in the evening and I started doing self practice in the morning. And if I do go to classes, I would go late in the afternoon before dinner. So I can go home and have dinner before 7 and shower and go to bed before 10. And so that's what I started doing after discovering about adjusting yoga practice to seasons, stages of life, and your doshic imbalances. And for the next few years, I explored different yoga offerings to my students, my community, In addition to doing in-person classes at work, I offered some health coaching. I also recorded yoga videos and also created short online self-study courses, and not just offering yoga as a physical practice, but I also started including yoga philosophy into my teachings. And also at the same time, I ventured out to online marketing, coaching, business coaching, and consulting. I also did web design and web development for a couple of years. I've learned so much during this time. It was it was wild. I was learning from different business coaches and consultants about online marketing and paid advertising on social media. I've learned so much about marketing and business practice during this time. And I also offered to others as well. I see myself as multi-passionate and I love trying out different things. I actually never wanted to just teach yoga full time, especially in London. I never wanted to travel around London, going to different yoga studios to teach yoga. I couldn't imagine myself teaching 10 yoga classes like some other yoga teachers do in London. I enjoyed mixing teaching yoga classes with coaching and offering online courses to really keep me interested and challenged. But what I would say is that even though I never taught yoga full time, teaching yoga is something I've done consistently over the 10 years, whether it's teaching yoga once a week or 3 times a week. I been teaching yoga consistently over the past 10 years, which is amazing, which is surprising because I've never kept the same job more than, well, the longest job I had was 5 years, and or maybe more than 5 years, but that wasn't my choice, I guess. But what I'm trying to say here is that I get bored really easily. So I do like to try different things all the time. But when it comes to teaching yoga, I've done it consistently over the past 10 years. And that is very fulfilling to see for myself. So as I got more interested and learning more about Ayurveda in my spare time, finally in 2019, I went to India to do intensive 100-hour training that was focused on Ayurveda. And compared to my first yoga teacher training, I had an amazing experience in India. I stayed in this ashram in Rishikesh in India, and I was learning with other yoga teachers for 2 weeks in the ashram. It was a smaller group compared to my first yoga teacher training. And surprisingly, there were two other Japanese yoga teachers in that group, which was a nice surprise and it was really nice. I've not spoken that much Japanese since I moved to London, so that was a really nice experience. And I really felt home and I really felt the sense of belonging in a yoga community for the first time. They also taught us yoga and Ayurveda philosophy during that training, which I really enjoyed. And learning philosophy from an Indian yoga teacher in India, where yoga was born, was a life-changing experience for me. And this is where everything shifted for me. This training really helped me rethink about my own practice and how I teach my class. And this is when I shifted to doing yoga as a physical practice to living yoga. I noticed a lot of time that yoga teachers focus on learning more advanced yoga poses rather than deepening their understanding of yoga philosophy or immersing themselves into yoga history. I really want to stress that yoga is not just a physical exercise, and working on advanced yoga poses is not advancing your yoga practice in any way. I say this because I was doing exactly that when I was going to dynamic yoga classes a few times a week. I wanted to work on my handstand so badly because I was not good at it at all. So, I could share a photo of my handstand on my Instagram like other yoga teachers do. And I know it's really silly things to do, but I thought that is what I needed to do to become a popular yoga teacher on the social media. So after my second teacher training in India, that was 2019, and then we had lockdown in 2020. And I was really lucky and privileged to be able to keep my day job during the pandemic. And also, no commuting to the office every day meant that I had more time to focus on my yoga business online. And I really immersed myself into creating an online program during that time. And I was really focused on creating a program that combines yoga, Ayurveda, and Vedic philosophy. Basically, everything I was learning at the time and everything I really enjoyed teaching. And to be honest, it was a lot of hard work. I was still working full time and creating a program in my spare time on the weekend. So it was a lot of hard work, but it was so much fun at the same time as well. I also focused on my own yoga practice on and off the mat during that time. And in September 2020, my partner and I decided to go vegan. Although traditionally Ayurveda is not about vegan diet, and a traditional yogic diet is vegetarian rather than vegan, I was really living Ayurveda's teachings of living in harmony with nature and also living sustainably by eating seasonally and eating locally produced fresh homegrown food. And from a yoga perspective, one of the yamas from the Eightfold Path in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra is ahimsa, which is often translated as non-harming or non-violence. The more I studied yoga and Ayurveda, practicing veganism felt the right thing to do. And I also got clear with my core values for my business and in my life, which is based on satya, which is truthfulness, and ahimsa, which I mentioned earlier, so no harming and no violence, and asteya, which is often translated as non-stealing or generosity. You can see my core values listed on my website. I really took time to think about my core values and how I share this with others. So please do have a look on my website. It's on my About page. So please go and have a look if you're interested. So almost 10 years have passed since my first teacher training. I feel like over the past 10 years, yoga has become a lot more popular, more widely available, especially in the past 3 years or so where many yoga teachers now offer classes online, either live or via Zoom, or pre-recorded yoga videos on the platform like YouTube. There are definitely more yoga teachers sharing their yoga classes online for free. But although yoga is more widely available, I feel yoga has become less inclusive and accessible. And yoga has been used more as a monetizing opportunity in the Western countries. There's always been a lack of diversity in terms of race, gender, and age in the yoga industry. Before I became a teacher, I'm usually the only person of color in most of the yoga classes I attended in the past. I don't see many yoga teachers who are from Black, Asian, minority ethnic background. And when you look around in the yoga classes or on social media, yoga is often practiced as a physical exercise by able-bodied, often slim, young-looking females. And I mentioned my experience in my first yoga teacher training, but I have to admit that I still feel like I don't belong in the yoga teacher community or yoga student community. I still feel like an outsider, and I often shy away from telling people I meet for the first time that I'm a yoga teacher. I guess this is something that I need to work on for myself, but I've always felt like I would be judged or they would be surprised that I'm a yoga teacher because I'm not a typical yoga teacher they might see on the social media. But the sense of not being able to feel I belong or fit in has always been my theme in life. And I do feel really sad about it, that I actually feel this way in yoga, the practice I feel so passionate about. But that's the truth. And I've been thinking a lot about and educating myself on how to offer more accessible and inclusive yoga, both as a physical practice and yoga philosophy. But also, how can I promote yoga better to the underrepresented group that would probably need yoga the most in their lives? And how can I make them feel that they belong in a yoga community? So that's something I've been thinking a lot about. So what is next in my yoga journey? Whilst I'm a qualified yoga teacher and I've been teaching yoga for 10 years, I see myself as an eternal student of yoga. I have just completed Yoga Nidra teacher training a couple of weekends ago, which I'm really excited to share more with you over the next few months. I'm also furthering my training on trauma-informed yoga and trauma-informed somatic teacher and coaching, which I'm studying next month. I am really excited to share more about this over the next few months as well. And also, as I mentioned, I am on a mission to make yoga more accessible to everyone. And I'm looking to do further training to learn more about how to teach accessible yoga, like chair yoga. I am really privileged to be able to learn from amazing yoga teachers and share this amazing wisdom with others. And yeah, so my journey continues. Thank you so much for listening to my yoga journey to date. I hope hearing about my journey helped you in some ways and inspired you to start or continue your yoga journey. Let me know if you have any questions or feedback. Thank you again and see you next time.